Hello, I'm RJ Kozane with pghmuseums.org, and you are watching Art Talk. Today I sat down with Anna and Taylor of Slowdanger. They're a multidisciplinary dance entity. We talked a lot about community, ways to connect the viewer and the artist while performing, got into music, where they've been. We're in the space upstairs, and they have a lot going on here. They've had a lot going on here for almost half a decade or over. It's a pleasure, always a pleasure, to see something that they've done or even be in the same room. So you're getting a real treat watching this right after the break.
Sidekick Media Services. We are your sidekick in business for social media, video production, and more. Find out more at sidekickmediaservices.com.
I'm RJ from pghmuseums.org. I know who you are, and I could spend probably an hour telling everyone who you are, but introduce yourselves.
I'm Anna. I'm one half of Slowdanger.
I'm Taylor. I'm the other half of Slowdanger.
And they're Slowdanger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dancers, you make dance music, you do contemporary dance, you DJ, you've scored plays, you've had your sound resonating off the walls in MoMA for morning class with Jasmine Hearn. I'm just gonna, I could list everything.
Yes.
And it would never stop. It would be the whole interview. And I just saw you back in September. So, and it just feels like the whole world has changed. So my first question, like definitively to both of you, is how are you defining Slowdanger, like in 2020, in comparison to when you started and even in like a month ago?
Definitely. I think the bio says that we're a multidisciplinary performance entity, and I still feel that that holds true since September. And we mostly opened that up from what we initially kind of labeled ourselves, which was a performance duo, to an entity to house more of the collaborative projects that we're involved in and that we want to continue to be involved in as we enter into the future.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like we set out in like 2018 to kind of shift from that identity as a duo to being more of a entity. And I feel like coming into 2020, we had some successes in 2019 of figuring out what that shift looked like and how to navigate projects. So it's feeling like we've settled there in 2020.
Yeah, and the things that you guys do pretty much feel like one cohesive piece. I know you've described Slowdanger itself as being like a non-binary entity. So when you put on something like, the first thing I saw you with was Empathy Machine at the Kelly Strayhorn, and it felt like it was you two, but it was also like a group of, was it 5 collective people? And then like the creative ring that Projectile Objects did for you guys. Yeah, and it just felt like it wasn't a duo to me. It wasn't even like a collective. It was just like, this is like an aesthetic that is whole, completely whole.
Awesome. We like to talk about the process of building a work where there's multiple bodies and energies involved, as if we're building an organism that has like differentiated cells, but they also are aware and exist within each other. And we spend a lot of time early in the process really kind of investigating individually through our bodies, but also sensing this kind of group body that we build together.
Yeah, I feel like even in the inception of Slowdanger, we were just talking with somebody the other day. When we first started out, we were like, this is Taylor and Anna dance projects. And it just never felt like, it just always felt like another being was being formed. The fusing of our bodies and the bodies of our collaborators and the artistries and minds, it just felt like another form was being created.
Yeah.
So we've really enjoyed figuring out the language around that for artist statements and bios, how to talk about that creative process and that amalgamation of forms.
And I also think the continued goal is to blur the lines of our disciplines and the disciplines that we engage with in the work. Specifically with the new projects we're approaching, a lot of, because we're sound artists and movement artists, a lot of these projects fuse and question and allow us to examine how we can blend our bodies as an instrument to produce sound through like sensors or interactive virtual environments.
Which
so
you definitely worked in.
Yeah.
Resonant Body comes to mind as being, you worked in the Carnegie Museum with sensors on, was it on your body and the audience's body? Like, how did that work? How did that all come about? Because that is groundbreaking.
So the sensors that we're wearing on our bodies measure and send our biometric data to basically a MIDI controller that goes into our Ableton software that is then sent out through like a regular aux cable into a resonant speaker that the audience is in contact with. So they're not necessarily directly influencing the sound, tactile information, but they are receiving it through their bodies.
And I think the kind of impetus to do that came out of Anna and I and some other collaborators talking about the ocular centricism of dance and how dance is built with that idea that it's going to be viewed through eyes mostly. And I used to work at the Western Pennsylvania School for Blind Children as a paraeducator. And my time there, it really started to make me think about that. And how dance can be delivered in a more accessible way as far as sensory. So we wanted to make a dance that was felt. And Robert Zacharias, our collaborator on Resonant Body, he is an incredible engineer of objects and electrician work. So we were able to bring our idea to him and work together and make it possible to have somebody feel the dance. And we want to take it to another level where we're measuring the temperature of our skin and our heart rate as that changes while we dance. So that's like the next level that we're trying to kind of explore and find some residency support for.
And I think as we continue to develop the work, there will be more influence from audience members. Like there will be more of a development of passing off, like where the sensors are housed.
And just thinking about like accessibility in art form is very, I was thinking about that last night, that there's not a lot out there for someone who may be blind or even deaf. Like two things that come to mind last year where Resonant Body and then People's Pride booked Big Frida. And you have the ASL interpreters up there. And to make it like more like whole for someone who may need them, Big Frida just twerked on them the entire time. So it's like adding that interaction there and just making sure that someone who may be disabled or experiencing something where they can't fully grasp it the same way an abled person would be able to is fantastic. And with Resonant Body, like how did you do testing beforehand, or was it just a collaborative work and you said, let's see if this works?
There was a lot of conversations with Robert Zacharias from the very beginning. And when we had brought this idea to the museum, because the residency was engaged and within the same time span as the Access and Ability exhibition that was happening, they really were excited about the potential of that experience being offered in the museum. So we have been working with Robert Zacharias and friends with them for a long time. He actually came to our classes for many years. So he has the background of being in our movement practice before coming in as a collaborator on a project, which I think is awesome.
It's always good to know who you're going to collaborate with.
And we kind of were like, I think you could do this because you're amazing. How do we build a tactile like system for an audience that is translating our movement? And he came up with the idea of these wireless MIDI controllers with the sensors because they're relatively cheap things to build. All the sensors cost anywhere between like a couple cents to like maybe $3.
And we were able to communicate with the software wirelessly through radio frequency that is alive and in our air space all the time. And along with those conversations that Anna mentioned, we just did a lot of research, and we wanted to use the museum as like the unveiling and presentation of it, but also as the I guess, the beta tests to see how it would work. So it kind of served as both. We kind of went in being like, well, we've built this object and it works, but we don't know if it's going to translate. We don't know if the concept with folks is going to work. And I think after just the first one, we were like, I think it works and this is really exciting. And then we had a series of more. So that time at the museum really gave us an opportunity to test in a more performative and experiential way, which I think the project needed.
I also think that prior to these beta tests, there was a lot of like, how do we negotiate this relationship of feeling? What is the choreography of interaction for the audience? So it led us on a lot of avenues. Initially, it was going to be this like kind of helmet that everyone wears, and this wire is in a circle, and they're all feeling it through the wire, and they have to build tension as a group to contain the performance inside. But we found, as we started working with the actual vibrations, that if you bend or curve a line, the vibration diminishes. So we thought of, okay, well, maybe a straight line works best, but how do we make that accessible to people at any height? So it's not like a bar that could be inaccessible to someone who may not be able to like reach to that level, or so we considered a diagonal line. It's all really simple things too. You come up with these questions and you're like, oh, the answer is so much more simple than we were initially thinking with this like complicated like tension system that we were going to build.
Right. It's always the logistics where you have to figure out what is going to happen to make the project work.
Yeah. And we take a lot of pride in process and having failures and trying things and it not working. Every experiment and new addition just teaches us more about what we're getting to. Like Anna said, having 3 or 4 designs and finally settling on, oh, it's just as simple as like a diagonal line. But I enjoy that unveiling of the process and those discoveries through failures and things not working. So it was an exciting journey with Robert and us to figure that out.
For sure. Yeah, I think that was, I love even thinking about that project. I wish I could have been there for it. So hopefully whatever the next step is with like the temperature and stuff, I'm all for that.
It's coming.
It's coming. We're hoping for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about classes. What was in Body 2? You're currently, well, I'm waiting for what's coming. Are you doing classes now? We're in the space upstairs.
Yeah.
And I know you have a lot of your movement classes here. Are those continuing on in the future? What are they? Because I mark interested every single one of them on Facebook, anything you do up here, but I never know what everything entails. So if you could just let me know, and whoever is listening out there now, what to expect here, that'd be great, because they look great.
Yeah, so the space upstairs has been a space that Anna and I have been a part of for a long time. It's kind of the space when Slowdanger was born that we were able to kind of start building whatever we were setting out to do. So the classes we teach were Anna and I wanting to start offering open level movement workshops for the community, for anyone who wanted to come. And they've been running now on and off for going on 6 or 7 years. And through the process of continuing to offer them and do them, and then eventually doing them in other cities, we've been able to kind of, I guess, brand them as Slowdanger physical integration workshops. And they're intended to be open level for people, not marketed so much as like a dance class, but an embodiment workshop where people can come and we co-facilitate the sessions. And it's leading people through imagery and somatic-based exercises and improvisational ideas so that they can get closer to their own sense of embodiment without this kind of pressure that I think sometimes a traditional dance class can have for people who've never taken it before. So it feels like a very open and supportive space for experimentation. But we are running some in February here.
I think it's every February Sunday, except for the first one. And then I believe the 9th of March.
Okay.
So I think it's about 5 sessions, and we used to offer them every Sunday when we first started out, but since we've started touring and traveling more, it's been harder for us to maintain that.
For sure.
But we're really excited to be offering them for another extended period of time, because I feel like the community really builds through those extended periods. People come back multiple times, and they're able to deepen their practice through like multiple exposures.
And it's not like a linear thing. Like people can come and go as
Yes.
they please.
Exactly.
Slowdanger doesn't really live in the linear timeline.
No, I don't.
Yeah. We've kind of built these different, Anna and I talk about it, these different kind of modular ways of running the workshops. We have some systems that we feel like work for us and help get us onboarding in those classes. But it's always different. We have to be open to the room and the people that are there. We wanted to open up our process to the public, how we create movement, how we think about it. And this also felt like a lens to do that. And we've met many collaborators. Rue Emmons, who was in Empathy Machine, has been in a lot of our work. They were taking our classes a lot. So we've met a lot of people that have become a part of like the Slowdanger entity and family through those many workshops too, which has just been an exciting like plus to doing them. It's building, you feel like you're building a community and I guess a team of folks that understand like why we think it's important to be doing what we're doing. So that feels nice.
And I think it's really important to offer more spaces where adults are able to have nonverbal processing.
Yes.
And I think that is really what our classes offer for people, is this space where they can move through their body, their energetic body, their emotional body, and they don't have to like necessarily describe it or like have it all out there for everyone. But that process really, I think, integrates a lot of information somatically and also emotionally. And I've used it, and we've both used it to heal ourselves cyclically over and over again throughout our lives.
Absolutely.
For sure,
It's definitely taken on this wellness factor that people are attracted to coming to it. We get new participants all the time that want to come and they want to move through their emotions, want to move through things. And that just feels really exciting that it's coming out of a dance kind of lens, because as Anna said, that's how we've always felt with dance. It's been a way for us to process and heal. So and we just wanted to dance with other people and dance more often. So we were like, let's just hold classes and invite people to them.
And it's really grown. It's led us to offer these workshops in many cities across the country. And that's really exciting to see that it extends further than just Pittsburgh as well. While Pittsburgh remains the home.
For sure. Yeah. And we are here at pghmuseums.org with Slowdanger. If you want to come to one of these things, open to the public, just come on up every Sunday in February and March. Thank you for checking out this interview and for supporting them and us. We're new, we're growing. We have a huge directory on our website, every single gallery that we could think of, every museum. If you just name where you're at, I'm sure we have it on our website listed with events that are happening there. So you need to throw up what you're doing.
Yeah, so we're doing those workshops while we're here in February and into March. And then we're also starting a new kind of cyclical series called Open at the space upstairs. And this was coming out of conversations we were having with Pearl-Ann Porter about making a space where the process can be made visible. It's not a polished performance. It's also not just a straight improvisational space. It's a space where we can have audience come in and potentially participate and engage with something that's in development. And inviting in collaborators who will also be like sharing that space. So this next month on February 13th, we'll be with Jasmine Hearn, who's a dear friend and
longtime collaborator
of ours. Yeah.
Yeah. And you worked with her recently, last year, in the Carnegie Museum.
Yeah.
And Intimate Subjects is what that was. I was there for that. And I haven't seen someone or like a group of people have such control over the audience and involve them to the extent without really directly involving them. So just to give whoever is watching like a background, like there was things spread all across ground floor of the museum. And then the main thing was like a show where it was you, Jasmine Hearn, and
Abdu Ali.
Yes, and you had 3 performers in the main space as well. Who's the other performer?
Katia Maria, who is a performance artist based out of Berlin, was there with us.
Yes, okay.
And Projectile Objects had an installation that we danced within as well.
And then we also had Resonant Body available in the music hall foyer.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it spanned all across the museum. So we had a big like dance show. You had the whole hall to use.
Yeah.
At the end, we just somehow followed you.
I know.
Down the entire ground floor, across all of it. And if you're from Pittsburgh, you know the ground floor is very long. And just completely entranced because the performance was continuing. And then we get in there, there's like a DJ show with you guys singing and dancing. And then we get Abdu Ali coming out in this gorgeous gold dress and killing the stage. The amount of involvement with the audience that you have in terms of how to like encapsulate them and just like make them watch and follow I haven't seen that since Kanye and Jay-Z at Console Energy Center. It's a ridiculous kind of like comparison there, but like, that's all I can compare you to. It's not often that you see like a local act, not that you're local anymore because you're everywhere, do that. How do you go about like thinking, this is how I'm going to involve the audience in this is how I'm going to lead them down a hall, or even something with Empathy Machine, which was more like a centralized kind of like sci-fi cyclic sort of structure. Walking through the crowd and grabbing somebody's hand, like what goes into, okay, this is how we are going to involve the audience, because it's not just a community with you guys. It feels like the community as a whole.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of practices that we've tried to engage in these classes of sensing other people. And also, like, I really like that you bring up that it feels like a community. Like, we never want our interaction or engagement to feel like it's forced upon the audience. We want to invite them into it and offer it consensually so that we open up the engagement and they have to take the first step to engage, as opposed to us, like, grabbing them or, like, telling them what to do.
Yeah.
I think that requires a lot of, like, empathic training and response of, like, witnessing someone and kind of reading their signals. But then also, like, how do you ask the question, I think, is what we also think about a lot with engaging. It's like, how do we ask the question and then open up the space for them to answer or
Definitely.
to respond.
Yeah, and intimate subjects specifically, that was the 3rd year that we were able to engage with that programming at the museum. So we kind of had some research and past experiential data to work from. And some of our past work, we've always kind of tried to look at how we can diminish the separation between dance audience member and dancer on stage. So Anna talking about the kind of invisible ethics and the nonverbal consent has been a big part of figuring out how that works. And the museum events specifically, there are people who are there who have come to a lot of our work and understand and have built this kind of trust with us. But then there's also new individuals. So there's this intersectional space of what is happening. And I think the conviction from the performers in those museum shows, we're kind of always in the state or the characters that we're playing, because if we drop that and, and walk away, then the audience member might not, they may lose that connection.
Yeah.
So I think the dedication that all the performers in us had to stay embodied in that, continue to activate the space, be it the corridor or the hallway between. The audience perhaps gets curious and they want to follow and see what's happening. And we even use recognizable gesture and other kind of body language within that to help usher them into questioning whether they can follow or not. Because as Anna said, there's definitely moments of acceptance and rejection within that, which is all important responses to have. So we sometimes don't know if it's going to work. That transition you're talking about from, through the ground floor into the music hall, that was one of the things we've been talking about leading up. Like, this might not work. Like, people might not follow us. We don't know if it's going to happen. So there's always the uncertainty for us too, and we were pretty surprised. We're like, oh my gosh, people actually came in here. But I think it's just a combination of a lot of intuitive energy, maintaining that presence, and seeing the audience and being with them physically and through gesture, so that they feel like they have agency within that space to go.
Also keeping the interaction and the questions simple for people, so they don't feel like they're getting it wrong. I think that's the biggest thing when you're starting to incorporate any kind of immersion or interactivity, is like, how do you like leave the space open enough so that the audience doesn't feel like, oh, I'm going to interact wrong. I'm going to experience wrong.
Right. Which
Because
is definitely a question I think everyone in the audience,
Totally.
myself, knowing you even has,
Yeah.
like, what if I do this wrong?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, I don't want to mess up their performance for them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think that's always, and I mean, we have those questions too on our side, and me going to other shows as an audience member, I've felt that too. And I think that's always going to be in that space. And I think there's something great about that questioning, because we think then we start to think about ourselves in the space and our embodiment and how we're engaging. I think we're inspired by that questioning that people might have, and how we can build more entry points and make the worlds that we're creating clearer. Somebody that came to Empathy Machine talked about how they question those things when they see dance. Am I getting it? Do I understand it? Am I watching this right? But then they said that they felt like the world that was built on stage or in the space was so clear and had so much shared language and aesthetic and design to it that then they felt like they had arrived and they were there, and then they could navigate and find their own sense of meaning and presence. And I just felt like that was a really strong feedback from somebody on how folks feel in those spaces, those immersed environments.
Because I feel like a lot of people have those questions surrounding specifically like dance and contemporary performance. They sometimes don't know how to relate to it. They don't realize how much agency they have to offer their own perspective in the space. And I think that's a big aspect of our work, is providing multiple entry points sensorially and through disciplines, so that folks feel like they have the agency to like fixate on one or relate to another. And then all of a sudden they're relating their own experiences to this work, and they're having an empathic response to the performers.
Yeah, keeping it open as you both do, I feel like is the best. It's interesting, like the lines of communication are so difficult to open sometimes, and then when you break through, it's there, and it's just there, period. Yeah.
Tension release.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit from there, with dance, you also do like kind of alternative dance music.
Yeah.
So we're swimming in the same lake, river there. When you're thinking about creating a project or how you're going to incorporate sound into your projects, how does that all start? Because I know Slowdanger, was it initially like just tinkering around with music and dance and going from there?
Yeah, I think respectfully and then collectively, Anne and I have always had a connection to sound and music as dancers. I've never had any formal music training. My first dance class I ever took as a kid was tap, so I always kind of had this sound making and rhythmic element attached to it, and I've always enjoyed music and felt like dancers are the conduit to, be it silence or sound or the movements. So I think it was inevitable when we continued to make work together to continue to peel the layers back of what we were doing and adding more elements, and sound definitely emerged. At first it felt very exploratory and tinkery, but I think the more we wanted to enmesh that with the work we were making and our bodies, we had a clearer sense of what that zone and what that space was going to become.
I also think we were very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of friends who were very generous with their knowledge. And generous with like their gear, like showing us how to use a DAW, showing us like
digital audio workspace for anyone else.
Lending us some like instruments that we started experimenting with and creating our own sounds with, and giving us advice on the best cables and stuff like that. We would not be where we are without the friends that have helped us kind of develop this, specifically our friend Dario, who also managed us locally and started getting us booked throughout Pittsburgh. And I think really like going through that process of the learning curve of learning another discipline. I was a vocalist. I was trained in like classical and musical theater voice growing up, but I really was able to use my voice as an instrument through this process of learning how to use digital and electronic instrumentation.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing for it as well, is how do we embody the sound and how do we bring embodiment to the sound? And the sound is another extension of our body at that point that physically impacts an observer.
And we think a lot about building worlds. Like when we've been thinking about the work that we make, we try to think of it like that. We're making an ecosystem, we're making a world, we're creating a landscape, and sound feels like such a part of that for me. Like dreams that I've had, or I've always loved music and films, and the kind of atmosphere that can create. We wanted to have a hand in that. Also logistically, not having to ask for rights to use other music and stuff, of course, is like a logistical benefit. But as Anna was saying, it felt like this extension of our bodies, and we just had this desire. And we didn't know what we were doing, but we had friends who, hey, you like this sound, you might like this reverb pedal. It might give you this quality that you have, or you might enjoy this machine. It's just been a very healthy exploration, finding people that really are supporting one another.
And it continues, you know, even like having a residency through Pearl Art Studios with Stacy Pearl and Herman.
Yes.
Like Herman opening up his studio to us and like teaching us how he works within his studio has helped us learn more about kind of engineering within our own, like giving us a plug-in, you know, and us kind of like playing with it on our own. Like these small acts of like sharing our like wealth of knowledge with each other really helps build a community and mutual growth.
Yeah.
And seeing how that opened up to, like, people wanting to, you know, our friend Juan, who runs MISC and is a part of the Detour Collective, wanting to release that music. Like, Juan coming to our shows, hearing music for it, and working with us. That support and that trust to, like, put something out there that is created through these different lenses really just excited us and still does. And it's cool because in Pittsburgh, we know it's a smaller city, so you can see a lot of ripples of the things that you do, as opposed to a much denser city maybe. And we've met people through the DJ and techno communities who now come to our shows, and we go to their events, and we had people help us learn how to DJ and why we had that desire, and help us kind of articulate what we were doing, and just simple things of like backing things up properly and having things ready to be played.
All things that I don't think I know how to do.
Literally, like the learning curve felt, I think sometimes I do still feel that sense of like imposter syndrome, or like I don't know what I'm doing.
Me too.
But I try to trust that uncertainty because there's things happening, there's creations coming out, and it feels like a part of us and a part of me that is sacred and ritualistic at this point. So,
and I think we've also learned so much now that we're also getting into scoring more dance and like theater and kind of commission work. It's like through each commission, we're able to learn something. We're able to maybe pull out a piece of gear we haven't in a while and learn it more deeply through this process with another person. Also, something that we've been getting into and have done from the beginning is sampling within the process. So sampling within a dance studio and incorporating that into the sound score, or taking the room tone of a specific place that we're performing in and creating an ambient layer through that kind of reverberation of room tune.
It adds something like that just glues everything
together. That connection to place and that furthering of the world. We were just with a friend of ours, Mark Caserta, who is choreographing on a company in New York City that we're making the music for. And we had a lot of that give and take with him talking about the environment and the world. And being dancers also, there's kind of this expedition of the language. Like, we can understand the choreographer because we are choreographers too. So that's been something that we've enjoyed. We've always tried to see how close can we get the disciplines to being one thing. And it feels like we're figuring that out.
Yeah, and we understand the process of the studio. That is where we feel most comfortable. Sometimes, and I notice this in myself, sometimes more comfortable than I feel in like a studio scenario. I'm like so much more comfortable just improvising and recording in a dance studio. Just because I'm like, this is my space. You know?
I think recording studios, for me felt very intimidating.
Oh yeah, I've worked in them, and I still would rather be in like my bedroom or recording something that I'm doing live on stage and using it later than walking in. They have their space for sure, but it's like, I have to get all this work done and pay so much money. Yeah.
And I think also like the process that we've had with Herman really helped us kind of jump over that.
Definitely.
By him also like setting up a studio so that everyone's comfortable. And asking like, how do you want to record? You want to do an affected vocal with your loop pedal and then like a dry one so that we can mix the two?
Options.
I was like, yes. Like, you know? So it's all continuing to like process and be in process and never to feel that we have this fixed idea of how we make something.
For sure. And you have, so we have like all of these world building things. Like you have the community, you have the dance that you make, you have the dance that you do, the classes, everything. What does, just as like to end it out here, what does a Slowdanger world look like? In any capacity. Because it's when you go in, it's an experience to anything that you do. Down to like PathOS, which I wasn't even there for, but watching and looking at pictures, there were different rooms with so many lights and so many different things going on. And what does the world look like?
I feel like it, I really like what you said earlier about it not being linear. Like a lot of our worlds, we want to capture this sense of nonlinear space and time, that it could be alternate dimension, that it could be just like through the window that you looked in earlier. And I think that's with our research with virtual reality and augmented reality, we really, that is a really physical way of showing that. And that's why I was so excited to get into those collaborations, specifically with our friend Anna Henson that we've been working with for probably 2 or 3 years now. It's like a physical way we can show this paralleling reality that is influenced by the reality that we live in. So kind of this quantum feeling or the butterfly effect. It's like if I flap my wings over here, it changes the reality and like through the window. You know?
I think we think a lot about portals and how the worlds can have that sense of stretched out time or time not existing or other dimensions. We have always tried to take the shape of the containers that we're offered as far as being presented in, be it a house or a proscenium space or a gallery. We enjoy like transforming that space and having people come in and, you know, we get feedback all the time where it's like the space is completely different. Like it doesn't even feel like I'm in a house or in this gallery anymore. It feels like a new space. So I think what it looks like is it has this mood to it, this feel. We're very inspired lately by kind of post-apocalyptic and like futuristic environments and a queer future. So we've been thinking a lot about design elements. We have desires to have bigger sets and to try to get to a place where we can use more objects and more larger scale set pieces and things, interactive tech, so that we can make the worlds more enhanced and even larger in that sense.
And with what Taylor was bringing up, I think also this world is not a utopia. This world is also a reflection of the one that we live in, which is flawed and fragmented and painful. And how do we present that, but also not anguish in that? Like, and how do we present that in a way that could be critical of the one that we live in now?
And the critiques are there even down to something like last year, Empathy Machine. Empathy has been critiqued as being lacking.
Yeah.
Where we're at. And you've explored even in the drag scene, working with the Moon Baby and Princess Jafar, like working within non-binary and queer spaces. It's definitely come across for sure.
Yeah. And I also feel like when we were even doing research on empathy, there were arguments about, like, do we even need empathy anymore?
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
I was like, it's interesting we can take this thing, and we can take anything and basically make a critique on it. There's a Medium article on it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes, it's out there.
like that's like examining it and deconstructing
Sure.
it. And to acknowledge that and to not shy away from that, I think to not, to not put all this expectation on everything to be perfect
Yeah.
is really important in our process and in the way that we live in life and we exist with people.
Yeah.
I've had to really relinquish that. Like, I'm not perfect. You know, why should I put that on another person?
Yeah.
And how do I come to terms and reflect on it? And that doesn't mean I always have to accept it, but how do I exist alongside it?
And we've talked a lot about feeling that we don't need to create these works, whatever the statements and the subject matter that we're working with, we don't need to set out to solve the problem with empathy and technology, but it's a response. We live in this world too, and we're responding to that, trying to not always have a definitive answer because we don't know what's going to happen and how things shift, but being able to create spaces where it's being questioned, it's being looked at, and art's being made in response to it feels like a responsibility that we want to take on, reflecting what's happening in our everyday.
And I think what's exciting about the future is, like, all these collaborators that we are existing with who are resonating in the same sphere, and that we're able to kind of cohese not only, like, our movement and sound, but invite in, like, visual elements, fashion, with our friends Mad Recital, who are also noise musicians, who will be then collaborating on kind of within our sonic world too, to kind of continue to blur the lines through these relationships that we build with other folks who are awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys are awesome as well. Thank you so much
thanks.
for doing this interview
course,
and bringing
thank
your
you.
little community to our community.
Yeah.
This is Slowdanger.
Yes.
I am RJ.
Thank
You are the viewer. You are supporting us. You're a member. If you want to sign up, it's $20 on pghmuseums.org. You get some percentages off to admissions to specific galleries and things like that, and cool behind the scenes things with Slowdanger and everyone else that we've talked to, most people. Thank you so much, and thank you so much.
Thank you, RJ. Yes.
Thank you for listening to Art Talk from pghmuseums.org. Your host today was RJ Kozane, and the program was edited by me, Brian Crawford. Today's music was Wallpaper by Kevin MacLeod and can be found at filmmusic.io. It is licensed through the Creative Commons. Be sure to search PGH Art Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are found. PGH Museums is made possible through our members and affiliate museums, such as the Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center. Become a tornado. Make a thunderstorm. Be a TV weather forecaster. You can do all of this and more at the interactive Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center, located in the home of Punxsutawney Phil. Learn more at weatherdiscovery.org. We'll catch you in 2 weeks, right here on Art Talk from pghmuseums.org.